for us, because they never are.
Who knows
You see,
that? No.
it's true. It's true. Because it's you, there might be somebody waiting for us, but no, it's just us.
All right.
It's one of those things that I always kind of joke about. It's like, see, there's nobody there.
Yeah.
So we can chit chat and just be silly to start with, and then as soon as we get like one or two people in, some people come in at like 2 minutes after. But
Sure.
we do have regular guests, which is really nice. I never thought that this would become what it's kind of become, and it's absolutely fascinating to see all these people that stop by regularly
Oh,
and,
that's
and
great.
want to be here. So now I'm saying that no one's going to show up.
The pressure's on.
The pressure is on. So let's do an official welcome to all of our guests who are here for Friday with Friends. Connie and I were just chit-chatting for a second, and then just as soon as I started to say, let's get going, we can't talk here for, doing silliness forever. So we're here, we're live. It's broadcasting from, where are you, Connie?
Asheville, North Carolina.
Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm from New London, New Hampshire, New England, New World. And we have a whole bunch of people here. We got Via Goody.
Nice.
And we've got Rachel Hedman, of course. I told you
Hi,
Rachel's
Rachel.
going to be here. And Linda, that's Merrick. Where did Laura go? Laura Blyman Isolde is also known as Mrs. James, who was my daughter's kindergarten teacher, and she is still one of Perry's favorite teachers. And Merrick Bennett, he's a good buddy of mine down in Henniker. He's a comic book artist and is really good. In fact, if you like Civil War stuff, he is the guy for you.
Oh, wow.
Kristen Peramonte, I was just dancing with her 5 minutes ago with a couple of other people.
Yeah.
And it was good because the cameras were all above the waists. Who else have we got here? We've got Scott Griswold. Happy snow day. Yes, it is. We got snow here. Do you have snow where you are?
Wow.
Yes, we do.
We're
We have
just
about
getting
an
our
inch and a
first
half of
freeze
snow.
tonight.
And Haved Rezayi. I hope I didn't butcher your name there. Yaved, that's a cool name. That's a very cool name. And Mo Reynolds, of course. She's usually with us unless she's traveling somewhere. She's thinking about moving away from the States, though, which I think is a terrible thing to do, because we're just trying to get her set up over here, and then she buggers off to Belize or somewhere just to have some fun because she can, because it's COVID time.
And it's warmer here.
It is. It's true. When I saw the snow this morning, I was like, California looks good right about now. But I think Asheville might be safer. I don't know. Hi, Crow. How are you doing? It's good to see you.
Oh, nice to see you.
So welcome, friends. Everybody knows Connie Regan-Blake, and if you don't know Connie Regan-Blake, then you should, because she's freaking awesome, and she's a really super duper human being too. So Connie and I met years ago, like stonkingly years ago, and then we bumped into each other again at the National Storytelling. Jonesboro, wasn't it, or Timpanogos? Yeah, Jonesboro. And we kind of reacquainted, and it felt like we'd known. Well, for me, it felt like we'd known each other for years.
And me too. Definitely, there was just this real continuum, like we were picking up wherever we left off
in whatever lifetime it was.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so it was really, really cool. Hi, Delana. It's good to see you.
Oh, Delana. Nice.
Yeah, Delana Reed. So, yeah, there we go. There she is. So, Connie, what have you been up to since we last met, last saw each other, which wasn't that long ago, because I recorded you for my conversations with storytellers.
I just finished 2 days ago, 5.5 hours behind a video camera, being recorded for the Old State Storytelling Festival. And that's coming up November 6th. I'll go ahead and mention that to folks. And Michael Reno Harrell and Mitch Chappelle and Bill Lepp and myself are all featured. Lots of regional tellers as well. And it's going to be a full day. So November 6th. But they came here to my home. And we kept our social distance. And he brought 2 cameras and videoed it all. So, and it was really quite wonderful. I've not done a lot. I've got mine too, so if anybody walks in the door, they're not expected to. But it's interesting. What my intention is in telling to this camera is that I really feel the energy of all those listening. And I had a teacher once, a spiritual teacher, who talked about, it's a person-made thing, this linear time, that time is really all this. So whether people are watching this in what would on the calendar be 2 months from now,
Yeah.
or they're watching it in this moment with me, I still really try to kind of connect into that energy. And I think, it's helping me a lot with the virtual world.
Yeah. Yes. I've been. There are sometimes I've struggled with it, and there are sometimes I haven't struggled with it. So, who's your spiritual teacher? I mean, are you okay talking about your spiritual teacher a little bit?
Well, she's not well known at all, and she actually is not teaching right now. She still does a few teachings online on Zoom, but it's
Uh huh.
pretty rare. Her name is Barbara Johnson, kind of an ordinary name, but it's an amazing group called Open Door, and I've been a part of it since the 90s. And now we,
Seems like centuries ago, that doesn't it? Oh my gosh.
gosh, I know it. Yeah, but it's had a huge impact in my life in lots of ways. There are a lot of things that come up for me that that teaching will just be a sentence or two, and it's like this moment. And I actually use it too. I'll give this little hint in case people want it. If I'm rushing somewhere and I miss a light, or something doesn't work out just the way that I thought, or I don't get something, or I do get something and didn't want either. It's this sense of this perfection. And I will
Yeah.
say, I have been drawing on that teaching a lot in the
I
last
bet. Yes. I mean,
6 months, and particularly the last few months. But really trusting. It comes down to trusting that there's a certain perfection, and who knows what kind of rebirth will happen or is happening right now.
Right. Well,
Everything
so
that's
my wife and I, we were heading to my daughter's soccer game last night. It was her first playoff, and they won
uh,
2-0. Yeah. Real football. Not real football,
right
not
now.
American
Don't
football,
get
but
me in
real
that
football.
discussion, because I know nothing and I can't defend.
No, that's. But we were listening to this interview, and it's these two German teleplay writers, screenplay writers, who have written this TV show which is called Deutschland 89, and it's about this spy. It's 3 seasons, and it goes from like before the wall comes down to when the wall comes down in East Germany. And the guy who was born and raised in East Germany, he was talking about how in the last 100 years Germany has reinvented itself 4 times. And if they went from a monarchy to a what's the word I'm looking for? I guess they went from a monarchy to a communist state, then to a fascist state, and now into what this guy said was a well-working democracy, which I would have
And
to
in
say is
between that
true.
division, that
Yeah, yeah, and so and he was saying that the story that they're telling about Germany during the Berlin Wall coming down, which is like when the communism ended and the free Radio Europe became a thing in East Germany. It's like that maybe this is something that we could look at as Americans, is that this society this way of and I don't normally talk about politics on this show, but this was just a very the Weimar, yes, thank you, Merrick, the Weimar Republic of the 1920s, and so maybe this is this period of change for us. We've been on this two-party system forever, and now that this whole thing is going on for the last 2 elections, where a lot of people have thought, well, here's a rock, here's a hard place, and here's me, and it's kind of interesting to see that, well, maybe there will be a change, an evolution, as Kristen just said, that will happen.
Yes, and I think
So
what I was saying just now too is that another aspect is that it can be quick. Sometimes we assume things are going to be hard, or it's going to take a really long time, but everything that's happening is preparing us to come into this new place. And,
Yeah.
back in 1969, I actually went to East Germany. I was traveling in, what was that?
I was 4.
Well, I was
Actually, I was
pre-birth,
5.
but I
I'm
somehow
lying. I
made
was 5.
it. No, I'd graduated from college,
Mm.
and I was living in Germany, and I lived there
Oh,
actually
wow.
for only 3 months, but I was hitchhiking and traveling all over Western Europe. But I took a train to Berlin, and then took a short train ride into East Berlin. And boy, it was really an incredible experience. Both borders, going from the border of Germany into East Germany, with those soldiers coming on and
Is
checking
that
everything, and your
is that what they
your
do? They walk down the train?
yeah, and your breath, they inside the train walk down.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember I was not a person, and still am not really, that leans towards fear very much. But I remember that, you know, what if they decide something's wrong with my passport? It was a very tense moment. And then that wall stayed, and then it came down. So I
Yeah.
think that's a place of
No one
hope.
was expecting it, and that was the amazing thing about that. When that wall came down, no one, it wasn't a plan or anything.
Yeah,
It just happened
yeah,
spontaneously, and it was peaceful, and it was awesome, and it was just a bunch of people like, we've had enough. It's got to end. I mean, there were a lot of things that led up to that, and there were other things going on which people did know about, but the fact that they were going to knock down that wall was just, nobody knew.
yeah,
And these were people in the newspapers, they didn't know. And spies, the spies didn't know that the wall was coming down because it was the people that did it.
yeah,
And that's what was so amazing, you know.
yeah. That's a,
Anyway,
that's a good image to remember that.
it is.
And
And I was working in the youth hostels at the time, and like 2 days after the Berlin Wall came down, we had this kid come over from East Berlin.
uh,
And the hostel that I ran, it used to be a golf clubhouse. So the living room was huge. It was massive, and then there were little dormitories like spiders' legs that went off the main room, right?
uh,
And so if the dormitory door was open, you could hear what was going on in the living room, and you could look inside to the living room. And we were all sitting around in these chairs, and you could see everybody that was in the hostel that was like looking in through, from the dormitories into the living room, where we were all asking this guy questions like, what was it like? And then we had South Afrikaans people, we had, people from all over the world were there.
yeah.
And everyone was like, you're from East Germany. That came down like 2 days ago. Let's talk about this.
Cool.
And he
Yeah,
wanted to talk to us as well. Like, well, what's South Africa like? What's,
yeah.
England like? It was fascinating. And to be, it's one of those things that, to be alive in that moment, and then to meet someone from East Germany. And then later on, like a few years ago, I met this guy who was there at the wall when it was coming down. He was a student at the time, and it's like, and he's a doctor at Dartmouth Hospital. So it's
That must have
very,
been just thrilling. Gosh.
oh my gosh, and also it must have been frightening as well,
Yeah.
because you wouldn't have known, what's going on,
Mm.
or what was going to happen. So what was it like traveling around Europe? Were you on your own, or with somebody else, or?
I went over with a friend that I'd graduated from college with,
Uh-huh.
and but she fell in love after we'd been over there for about 3 months with a guy in the military. They're still together all these years
Oh,
afterwards.
that's nice.
But she came back to the States and got married. So I traveled with her for a while, mostly hitchhiking, and spent these 3 months working in Wiesbaden, Germany, outside of Frankfurt. But the rest of the time, I was over there for a little over a year.
Hmm.
And had met up with some other friends, though, and which, back then, I don't know if it's still this way, but there were so many people, especially from Australia, New Zealand. It was
Hmm.
almost like a rite of passage to go to Europe for a
Yeah.
year after you finished schooling of some kind. And so lots of young people traveling. I didn't even travel with a sleeping bag. It was just a backpack, and stayed in youth hostels. And sometimes people just would put us up, and eventually, for the last about 4 months, two other friends and I got a little old at the time Volkswagen Bug. And then we
Nice.
got a tent that we would put on. We would wrap it all up and put it on top. And I remember my sister and her roommate came to visit me, and we were in Switzerland going over the Alps, and there were four of us in that Bug with all this big tent on the. It was. We felt like we were putting our feet outside the door and pushing,
Yes.
and praying, hope we make it, just inching up. But it was
Yeah,
really.
because those things, they're all the weight was in the back, so you could have flipped that. It would have been done a real Herbie.
But it,
I
it was
remember
an
when I,
amazing experience, certainly
yeah,
heart opening and eye opening on many, many levels.
yeah. Working in the youth hostels was amazing for me because we got so many different people from so many different cultures and
Yeah,
ages as well. It wasn't just young people that went there, although it was designed for young people. We had a lot of elderly people coming as well because I guess they liked to meet the young people and
yeah.
see what was going on in the world.
And it was,
So, folks, you heard it here first that Connie Regan-Blake was a couch surfer.
I remember people that took us in Italy, and I don't remember how we ended up meeting him, but he was really nice and took us in. And I don't think we probably offered to pay anything because we didn't really do that. I mean, people assumed we didn't have any money, but I think we were just talking about maybe asking, is there anything we could do for him, before
Hmm.
we left, or clean up or do whatever. And he said, no, no, just pay it forward. And I remember
Oh,
that
yes.
was the first time that I had heard that concept, and this was either 69 or 70, but that idea of then taking in another traveler myself that maybe needed a little help and such. So,
Yeah. Tony Toledo tells a story along similar lines as that.
yeah.
Um, he was biking across the states, and this guy stopped and gave him $5 so he could buy himself some food
Mhm.
because he assumed that Tony didn't have any money, or it would be a nice thing to give someone that's traveling across country on bike.
Yeah.
And so whenever Tony sees somebody with their bike packed, all the panniers are packed up, and they're obviously on a long journey, he'll stop and give them like $5 to buy themselves a coffee or a McBurger or something like that. So yeah, I love the fact of paying things forward. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
I do
It
too. I
is.
like that.
And when I was working in the pubs in the 1980s, it was the same with the Australians and the New Zealanders. Then there were a lot of them over there
Yeah.
in England and in London working for their year off. So again, that was in the 80s. So 20 years later, they were still doing that. Maybe they're still
Yeah.
doing it now. Well, they're not doing it now because of COVID, but
Yeah.
it would be interesting.
And I always like to say that, I don't know that it was necessarily safe for us to be hitchhiking. And it is
Hmm.
not something I recommend to other people, but we had pretty good experiences with it.
Yeah, I would. Yes, I don't know. The world's a different place now, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
even when I was over there, I went over in the 80s into Europe, and I was with a friend of mine, and there were times that if and this privileged white guy kind of thing, if I'd been a woman, I would have been a bit worried
Yeah.
with what would the outcome of this situation be,
Yeah.
and because it was two young guys, it's it's not as safe as it used to be.
Hmm.
And maybe that was back in the 80s, and maybe things have changed again, and it is safe. All right, so Kristen is saying it's totally safe to hitchhike in Europe. She did it in 10 years ago. Good for you. And she also says that the pre-COVID they were I'm assuming that the we is the Aussies and the New Zealanders. Yeah,
Or I think they're still hitchhiking, except, and then she said, well, pre-COVID.
pre-COVID. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's good. Good for the Australians and the New Zealanders, the Kiwis. We like those guys. I like those folks. They're great people.
I love their countries too.
Yes, yes. They seem to know how to do it right to some degree. We'll see. So what else have you been up to? You must be telling ghost stories and stuff.
I haven't been, that's always been kind of my thing, but I haven't really, I've been doing these recordings, but I haven't been doing a whole lot online in telling stories. It's a interesting thing. I feel like I did do a workshop. I did a 5-session workshop on taking your story to the virtual stage. And that, you were talking about, that was very intense, getting ready for that.
Yeah.
And very different than how my normal workshops are as far as preparing and stuff, because there's this enthusiasm. It can be time consuming, but it's this creativity that's flowing. And this was a different thing, constantly checking, this little tweak or that tweak on Zoom or on breakout rooms. And how do I assign this? And how do I do that? And I feel like I've learned a lot, but I'm still learning so much. But I did come to the place because there was a thought of, gosh, do I want to go down this road? But I have a feeling this road is going to stay with us because there's so many advantages too. I mean, I had one person in my workshop, that particular workshop, taking your story to the stage, is everyone comes here to Asheville. We have a wonderful little theater, seats 90 people. And twice a year we do performances up there. And then we give feedback on the performances. And it's lovely, always a full house. And so, but this time, with it being on Zoom, a storyteller from California was able to join us, and one from Ohio that might not have been able to cover all those travel expenses and housing.
Right.
So there are definitely advantages.
There are.
I feel like, I know the Timpanogos folks told me that they had, right after their festival this year, they had decided there was going to be a Zoom aspect next year. Or online, rather, not necessarily Zoom.
Right, because, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say they're planning on their event being in person, but they're going to have tickets for in person. They're going to have tickets for online. So like this year, people all over the world can listen. And they're going to have a combination ticket. So the people that go, but at 3:00, they're in the family tent. Then they'll have a week or two to catch what was going on in the other tents while they were listening to this.
It's true, yeah.
So I think
Jonesboro were doing a little bit of that already because they used to stream the family show, right?
Yes, live stream it. That's right.
They did. So it'll be interesting to see if Jonesboro are going to stream the rest of it.
Yeah.
So Tony has a question for you, Tony Toledo.
Oh, hi, Tony.
Everyone's best friend and uncle. How has storytelling changed in the years you have been making folks smile?
That's a nice question. Nice way to say it. Thanks, Tony. There have definitely been changes, some major and some consistency also. And the first thing that pops to mind is the types of stories. So when I started off here in the United States, it was almost all traditional stories. And I'd been hired in 1971 as a storyteller to go out to daycare centers. So I'd been introduced to the picture book world that way, and then was also introduced to children's literature and the literature more for junior high and high school, because I started doing performances at schools. So I brought that also alongside the traditional stories. Some of the Richard Kennedy stories, Oliver Hyde, and different stories like that. But mainly what you heard were traditional stories. You didn't hear people talking about their fourth grade. You just, you might mention something about where you were from as an introduction into a story. But that was very different. And it really kept with traditional stories, at least at the National Festival, and then at all the festivals that were birthed out of that festival. It stayed that way until probably the mid 80s or something. And Donald Davis, he was a bit of an instigator with that. I actually first heard Donald in a home down in a little town in the south western part of North Carolina at John C. Campbell Folk School. He was there taking a class, and he might have been teaching, but it wasn't storytelling. But he was always a storyteller, and he was also a minister at the time. But I heard him, he was telling stories in a friend's living room and telling traditional stories. And I just loved it. And I was artistic director of the National Festival at the time. So I hired him up to come and be featured there. And we can ask Donald, maybe you'll get Donald on here on this Friday afternoon's live conversation.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But we could ask him too. But my memory and what I would say to Tony about this change, this big shift then to personal stories, I think it began, so many of the tellers, so many people were coming to festivals and thinking, oh, I want to do that, teachers and librarians, which was very exciting. But they weren't necessarily going out and finding their own stories. They were then telling whatever they heard on stage there.
Right.
And so,
exactly the same way that they heard it as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Quite often.
We used to have a name that storyteller because you could tell. And we would do that. Ed Stuyvesant started that after the festival. And so we would sit down and pretend we were another storyteller because a lot of people were doing that, pretending. They literally same rhythm, especially because we had recordings. People were buying recordings, memorizing. But Donald, I think, was the one that said, and I don't know what he would say to himself about it. But from my perspective, it was like, there's now a lot of people telling this particular Jack tale. Let me draw on something else. And he was so good at it and still is, and inspired so many people and had so many listeners think, oh, I can do that. I have stories. And so it started bubbling and moving. And I personally love the combination. I tell a lot of personal and also a lot of traditional, but I feel like we've gotten too far away from the traditional. And I'm hoping that's swinging back some. And I always encourage people, go to 398.2 at your public library.
Yes. Well, Reggie Carpenter says that, the only way to be a really good personal storyteller, personal narrative teller, is if you are very well grounded in folk and fairy tales.
Yeah.
Because
you learn the rhythm of stories.
Right. It gives you the structure that you need. Yeah. Right.
Great.
Now, Rosie Best Kutra has said, are you doing a week-long storytelling workshop in Asheville next summer?
Oh, Rosie, thanks for asking. I've done 14 of those, but not this summer, and probably not next summer because we just won't know. But I would love to do another one. They're just remarkable. People come for a whole week, and we just immerse ourselves in it's almost like deep friendships that are formed in the moment. They're, around story. And then people just have this feeling of protection is one of the words that comes up, but this feeling of being able to be vulnerable. And so they kind of dive down deep. And it's been
I think there's this culture with us that is, I've known this when I've gone into school groups, into schools and worked with groups of school kids. And you establish this layer of trust.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be there if you're going to, like you say, be vulnerable and share. A lot of these kids have never shared stories before, or they've never been, they've never really been listened to before. And so when you ask them to get up and share something of themselves, either if it's a traditional story or personal narrative, you have to set the boundaries and say that there's no judgment here, right? We're just listening, right? And we're not going to make fun of anybody because that's not what we're here for. We're here to listen to people's stories. And it really does create this wonderful bond And I know that I'm in a cohort, but you're also in a cohort, right? A group of other storytellers.
I am. We
So you
are.
must that bond must be especially tight with them, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Or has
we
it gone beyond that and it's now the familial relationship where it's
it's
like,
family,
oh,
but it's almost
me, me,
always
me.
two aspects of family. We're usually thrilled to see each other,
Good.
and there's not big differences politically. We're not that we're all the same, but we're
Right, right, right.
on similar wavelengths. And it's an amazing group, though. We actually started over 30 years ago.
Wow.
And we're pulling a lot of numbers today, Simon. But
We don't have to.
I kind of like that. I started off in math. That's what I went to college to major in.
Ah,
I've always loved numbers. But we started, this group started for meeting for a whole week. And we did that for 30 years.
wow.
And we were
That's
like, there were a
amazing.
couple of people that thought, oh, this isn't for me, waking up and brushing my teeth and someone else coming into the bathroom right after me and brushing their teeth. And there were a few people that kind of wasn't their thing, or for whatever reasons, they had other
Right, right.
commitments. But 11 of us were there for 30 years, and almost no one ever missed any of it. And we met in mostly either up in New England. There's a great lake that we went to, a tiny, relatively small lake in rural Maine that we rented and had 3 houses on it. We each had private rooms. So we
Nice.
always did that, and we all worked on stories. And it was just incredible. We worked on life too, but our intention was to really have a safe place again for
Yeah.
that creativity to come out. I'm delighted to hear that you're in a group as well.
Yeah, well, when I was in Florida in January, Jeff Doyle was there performing with me, as was Mo and Diane Macklin and Pete Abdullah and I think am I missing anybody? Got the poster over there, but I can't see it because my eyesight's crap. But anyway, Jeff asked me if I wanted to be in this cohort, and I was kind of like, sure. I was like, who else is in it? And there's Ingrid Nixon, who's an amazing storyteller, there's Jeff himself, and then there's Anne Rutherford, who's freaking awesome. Norman Breck, who's a partner and is also a fun guy to hang out with. And then Paul Strickland, who is freaking amazing. I love Paul's work. And Sheila Arnold, who is like a good friend of mine. So I was like, wow, okay, yes, I'm in. And the idea was that we would get together over the summer and meet and work on story or stories, and hang out together, rent somewhere like you were suggesting. And then COVID happened, and we ended up meeting online every month and working on stories. And then we said, well, we should do a concert with these stories. And that's how the TBD Storytelling Concert Series kind of began. So yeah, it was, and we've become really tight because, during COVID, every single one of us has had some sort of, wall that we've hit of one form or another, or maybe like multiple walls that we've hit. And we've been there for each other to help us out.
Yes.
So, hey, my dog, if you hear a rattling every once in a while in the background, that's my reindeer.
Okay.
It's my dog Mo. She's in here with me. She doesn't like the stove being on, and we decided that because it was so cold today, this would be a good day to clean the oven. So we've got that on, heating up the whole house. And she doesn't like it one bit. But yeah, so the cohort's been an absolute freaking lifesaver for all of us, I think, in our group. Apart from Sheila, she's too busy to to think about anything other than work, I think.
Oh, she's amazing.
She is not the little engine that could. She is like the massive bog off engine that does. She is a force to be reckoned with.
And such an inspiration, not necessarily that you think you could ever do all that she's doing, but she and Donna Washington putting together that Artist Standing Strong together. And if there's anyone listening that's not familiar with that, be sure and check out their web page and their Facebook page. But it's just, they've turned it into, they got clearance for a 501c nonprofit. All this
I
happened
know.
COVID, and they're
Yeah.
supporting other artists and helping all of us, figure out ways to do this online. And yeah, but Sheila Arnold is just, she is just a force on many levels.
She is. She is. So we do have a question. Another question. Oh, Scott Moore. He's my buddy. Hey, Scott. How you doing?
Oh,
Good
good.
to see you.
Hi, Scott.
So Scott is not a storyteller. And it's always nice to have non-storytellers here as well as storytellers.
Yeah.
But Scott says, do you think that there is a lack of current present-day folk tales? I grew up with Paul Bunyan, etc., but I could not tell you if there was such a thing these days. Well, maybe the Saturday morning cartoons are today's folk tales, ?
Or the Avenger kinds of movies.
Yes.
So
Yeah. They're
maybe
totally
turn
mythical.
to the movies a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
but have that continuity with it. And some of the video games, I would think, are taking the place of as modern day folk tales.
Yeah.
I don't know much
Frightening,
about
isn't
them,
it?
so I can't really
I know.
talk about that much. But I know people are really into them, and they feel those characters, and they become those characters sometimes. And that's really what we do in folk tales too.
Yeah, it's true. We do. We embody them. And I think a lot of young people, certainly the Avengers series, I mean, you have Thor in there and Loki, and although they are not like the Norse gods at all, or not much anyway, they also corrupt the original stories quite generously. But it is. I think it certainly gives a source for people, an entryway for people to get in there and do their thing. So anyway. What else we got here? And just look at some of these comments. You could proper distance and people have own tents for the night and sanitize after use of facilities, pack your own meals. That sounds way too much like hard work. When you can sit at home and do it all online.
Especially with the chilliness. It's one thing
Yeah.
when you've got good weather for that. But that
Yeah.
adds a different layer, so to speak. You need to add different
It
layers.
does. And Rosie says you gave us a safe place to try out our new material. So there you
Thank
go.
you, Rosie.
Yay.
One of the cool things about that summer workshop too, and the web, what our presence, how our presence can go to other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every year, I had at least one person that was from a different country, and often from a different continent. And that brought such a wonderful perspective. I remember one year there was a man who he was a psychiatrist from South Africa and Dutch heritage, but his family had been in South Africa for many generations. And he was part of the reconciliation teams that moved around the country, giving people a chance to give voice to their hardships and their stories of oppression and such. And every summer, I was so inspired by this. Every summer, he did something totally out of his ordinary. And the summer before he came to my workshop, he had gone to France and taken a class in the Marcel Marceau lineage at the school there. And he had a daughter that lived in North Carolina, still does probably. We haven't been in touch lately. But his daughter lived in North Carolina. So he just went online, looked for workshops in the summertime in North Carolina, and found me and came to that workshop. And it was, I love that when we can bring, and that's, again, I keep looking for the good things about Zoom, but, there's a lot of people that have been in touch now with all the storytelling that's going on in India. I mean, Eric Miller is doing, is that correct?
Eric Miller.
Yeah. I said it didn't sound right, but I'm going to be telling stories for their healing festival in February.
Uh-huh.
But he's doing things and reaching out, and all of that is free. You can donate, but all of it is free, so it's open to a lot of people, both workshops and storytelling. But I love that idea of hearing other people's stories, not just our neighbors that are close by, but
Right.
our neighbors that grew up in very different ways than maybe we did.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Rachel was saying yes, Dr. Eric Miller is correct.
Yeah, good.
And Rachel Hedman, she also says, urban legends are still strong and brought up the point of Slender Man. Although I think Slender Man's gone. I don't know. Reawakening of it. But yeah, I think I think, yes, I would agree with that, but that's that's kind of like a different branch of it. But yes, I tend to agree. And also, Delana Reed says, Karen, stories are getting old. The reason for them, of course, needs to be addressed. So I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Stories are getting old, but they've always been old. Even when the Grimms collected them, they were old.
Well, I think though this is, and I don't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Delana, I'm sure knows more just in her story world over at ETSU, but that's become kind of a pop culture thing about calling people a Karen when it means like the woman
Oh,
in Central Park that called the police after the man who was there and just asked her to put her dog on a leash. And
right.
that's considered a Karen. And I'm feeling like Delana might be meaning that those kinds of stories, picking out personalities and then saying, oh, that's a Karen. Or
Right. Yeah,
she,
but in the 70s, when I was at school, it was always Traces and Steve. In fact, there was, I mean, they were the names that were always called out. Oh, that was a bit of a Steve or whatever.
ah,
And a friend of mine, they were doing, oh, I can't think what it was now. It was one of the Shakespeare plays. Oh, the only thing that's coming to my mind is Some Like It Hot, and I know that's not Shakespeare.
he might have had his own version though.
As you like it, as you like it. That's what it is. And and so we were in this building where there was a balcony, right? And it was a club, it was a nightclub, and they performed it in this nightclub. So half of the players were up in the balcony, and the other half were down on the dance floor. And they're kind of like, they've modernized it and they changed something, but they're like, oh, let's make, nudge nudge wink wink, watch this, hey Karen, and all the girls on the dance floor go, what? Right? Or Tracy is what it was. Tracy, and they're like, what? And then one of the girls like, hey, watch this, Steve, and all the guys are like, go, what? Because all the guys are Steve, right? Which I don't know if that's like similar to Karen or that the Karen thing is like the next step of that, the next growth of that. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And there's always Barbie and Ken too. So.
Yes, it's true. It's true. I didn't hear so much about those guys anymore.
No, they've really changed that, and now they have lots of different Barbie dolls that more reflect humans, and
Yes.
so they've become very popular.
As opposed to aliens from outer space.
That's right.
Yes. Yes. That's so true. We used to, when we lived in Portland, Oregon, there was a late night cafe. A lot of artists and drag queens would go there late at night, and they had a collection of Barbies, and some of them were not official Barbies that people had actually created, and they'd made boxes for them and everything. And there was a paraplegic Barbie. They had this shelf all the way around. They had all these different Barbie. There was an S&M Barbie. It was absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
To go there. Karen and Chad are the names today. Yeah, they do. They change every 10 years or so. All the popularity and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's All Hallows Eve, which it doesn't feel like it to me.
It is.
I mean, do you feel the same way? I mean, my daughter's talked to her friends about dressing up, but usually it's like a big deal, and she's trying on like 4 or 5 different. I think I'm going to be this. I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to do. I mean, she's 15 now, but like last year, she went through a couple of changes, and now I haven't heard. She's talked to her friends.
Yeah.
And that's
I
about
really
it.
know much. I know that trick or treating. Actually, I have always lived not real far out in the country necessarily, but I have always lived where in my, I've been in Asheville since '78. I've never had a trick or treater.
Really? Wow.
Right now, I have way too steep of a drive, but I love.
Is that on purpose?
Well, there's mountains here, you know. So,
Yeah, I know. I know.
but I've always loved Halloween. What do you mean? Who is that? I don't
I
know.
don't know. Who is that? Show us.
Oh,
Wow.
hi.
She got smacked with the ugly stick.
Yes, no, yes, right, left, and left, right. What is this? Are you trying to drive me crazy? Yes, Simon is. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I always try to drive people crazy. You should know that.
This is Hillary. And I am.
Is this referring to the last election?
No. And there are good witches and not so good witches. So
Yeah, right.
Halloween morning, she actually just appeared in this office where I have lots of stuff, and it was
That's
like,
so
hey,
weird.
what about me? And so she wanted to get on camera with me. So
She's excellent. I love that face. It's such a, it's real, it's so expressive. It's wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Simon, I love to mention about with ghost stories. I feel like the scary stories, not always ghost stories, but those intense ones that, you know, kind of raise the hair on the back of your neck, like we all like to hear at Halloween. One of the things that I think that they have done for storytelling in the early days of performance storytelling is that so many people, and still today, but it's changing. So many people in those early days, in the 70s and 80s, and even into the 90s, if you said you were a storyteller, or if somebody else said you want to go hear a storyteller, like a story, isn't that for kids? There was such an impression of that was what storytelling was. Now today we've got the moth, we've got slams, we have so much else happening, but
Yeah.
in those earlier days, you really had that impression. But it was a whole different thing if you said, I'm going to tell you a story, as opposed to, I'm going to tell you a ghost story. It was like that. Oh, and people were in a different way. And in those early days of when there were no storytelling festivals except the National, my cousin Barbara Freeman and I were traveling full time here in the States and doing storytelling. And we did most of our storytelling at folk music festivals. And the ghost stories was also really great for that. I feel like some of those stories were what put us on main stage because people got it. They realized, oh, this really is for adults. And then thankfully that has kept spreading, and people really have that sense now much more. We still run into people that go, storytelling for kids, but that's too.
Jill Lamard, Jill, I was just looking at an email that you sent me the other day. I haven't listened to the story yet, but I will, I promise. But Jill, who's in the UK, she's in Cornwall, Devon, I can't remember. It's still Children Must Love You. What books do you read? Yeah, I actually went... I'm sure Connie can say the same thing that I'm about to say. In fact, I bet like most people here will probably say the same things happened to them. But I did a storytelling event, and somebody said, "So what books are you going to read?" And I said, "I don't read books. I tell stories." And they're like, "Oh, well, what does that look like?" I said, "You'll see in a minute." And Tintagel, yeah, that's right. Jill's in Tintagel, which is the home of King Arthur, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we love King Arthur.
Yeah.
But at the end, the same person came up to me and said, "You read some really good stories." And I was like, was I holding a book at any point? Like, where were the pieces? And she, oh, no, that's right. You were telling stories, you weren't reading. And it's like they just watched like an hour's worth of me doing my thing without a piece of paper in sight, let alone a book.
Yeah, it's really a compliment in lots of ways, though.
It is, I guess.
That's
they're good enough to be published. If only the publishers thought the same.
The tricky part, and I feel this with traditional stories, I'm very grateful that they're in books. And as far as some of the collections, though, to go back to that question,
Uh-huh.
and some of the books, I love children's literature. And
Yes.
Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are, The Night
Yeah.
Max wore his wolf suit and made
Yes.
mischief of one kind and another. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, I'll eat you up. So he was sent to bed without eating anything. I mean, that is such a world. Harry the Dirty Dog by Jean Zion
I
is
don't know
another
that one.
favorite of mine. And, I've got a whole list. I don't get to tell those
Yeah,
very
so
much.
I like the stuff that I can't remember her name right now, but the Gruffalo and the Flying Broomstick, or the same author, she wrote The Witch. There's a series of books about a witch, and
Yes,
the
yes.
language is very simplistic, but the stories that those books tell are just really good stories,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they are the they might be the folk tales that we tell in the future when they've gone out of copyright. Please, thank you. Kevin just brought this wonderful thing up where he says a first grader said to me after a performance, "Thanks for
Oh,
the movie."
yeah.
And yes, if someone said that to me, I would totally take that as a compliment as well. That was awesome. That's
Absolutely.
amazing.
I can.
And this this is brilliant. Renee says my favorite key comment after storytelling was that was wonderful. It was like you were reading without looking. That is amazing.
There you go, Simon. That's it.
Yeah, I do like that. So if somebody says you're gonna read any books, I'll say yes, but I'm going to read them without looking at
Yeah,
them.
listen. And, you know, um, the young children, too, when I first started telling stories, were used to having that book. And I'd always want to show the book afterwards because part of my
Right.
role at the working at the library was to connect children to the
Mm-hmm.
best of children's literature. But I would say to make those images first in your mind and
Mm-hmm.
then pull
Yeah.
up the book and show the images and see how they kind of, the Judge Harvey Zemak is another one of my favorites of the Judge and A Penny a Look. Oh, I love thinking about all these. So thanks for that question. I appreciate it.
Do you think we should share a story each? Because it's like Halloween tomorrow.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Why don't you go first?
Me?
Yeah.
I was going to think of a story while you were telling yours. Ah, lordy. All right, now I got to think of, I got to think of a short one. That's the
Oh.
problem.
Yeah. How is our time?
Well, we got 10 minutes, but, I mean, some people stay on for longer. Some people watch it later and all the rest of it.
While you're thinking.
I could do a so there's yeah, I could do that. Once upon a time, a long time ago. I like that. If I had a kid say to me, "Thanks for talking to me," that's kind of sad. It's kind of heartbreaking and everything that the rain said. And this, yeah, Delani says this. My favorite comment by a child is, "I could just see it." And one of my favorite things is when you get pictures sent to you afterwards.
Yeah.
And they draw what they've seen. I don't think for me, there's not a higher honor than a kid doing a drawing of what they saw in their imagination.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot.
Of the story, because quite often it's completely different to what I see. And for them to share that is just, I just love it. All right.
What I tell people is, as the storyteller, we have the best seat in the house.
Yes, we do.
And I'll be glad to tell a story first if you want to think on yours. So I was just, you sounded like you were ready there. So I was just.
I was. I'm ready now.
Okay.
I'm ready now. I haven't told this story in forever. In fact, I'm not even sure if I've actually told it. We'll see how it goes. Well, there's the deep end. Let's just jump into it. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there were two young men that fell in love with a woman. There's nothing new with that at all. And one of them was a tailor, and the other one was a rich, stuck-up person that should have known better. And the young girl really, really loved the tailor. Now, the two men, they discovered about their loves for each other. And the rich young man, he decided that they would have a competition to see who could win her. Because in these long, long ago days, a woman was not allowed to choose her own love. And so the competition was that the tailor first would spend a night in a graveyard, a haunted graveyard, and he was to stitch a pair of pants for the rich man. For he said that if the tailor could do this, then he would give up his own chances at being the groom for their sweetheart. Well, the tailor couldn't turn that one down. That was an easy thing. You know, to quote Lynn Ford's grandmother, it's not the dead you have to be frightened of, it's the living. Well, the tailor went there. He had a pair of pants, all the measurements, all the material was cut out. All he had to do was stitch them. And there he was, sitting on a gravestone, stitching away. He had a lantern next to his side, his glasses on the end of the nose, stitching and stitching and stitching. And then one of the coffins, one of those great stones, slid off. And a hand came out. And a voice followed the hand. Here I come. Well, the tailor saw this skeletal hand, bits of flesh oozing off it, in the light of his lantern, and the light of the half moon that was there. And he says, "Oh, well, I see you, but I'm stitching this." And he stitched a little faster, and then another hand came out of the grave. I'm coming. I see you, and I'm stitching this. He stitched even faster. There wasn't much left to do, but then a leg came out of the grave. I'm coming. Yes, I see you, but I'm stitching this. The stitches started to get a little bit wider as he stitched up the leg. He finished that leg. Now there was just this pant seam where the butt is, and he's stitching that up. And then another leg came out of the grave. I'm coming. Yes, I see you, and I'm stitching this. And he kept stitching and stitching and stitching, but the stitches got wider and wider. And then the body and the skull came out. I'm coming. I see, but I'm stitching this. Just then he finished the pants, the trousers, and he took off. He could hear the clatter of bones following him. He ran as hard as he could. The bones started to fall apart and fall down behind him. But when he got to the rich boy's house, banged on the door, and he threw them in. He says, "The trousers are yours, and the bride is mine." And off he ran into the night. Well, the young man got his pants, but it said he wore them at the wedding. And as he knelt down to pray with the rest of them, when they were giving their blessing, the seat of the pants split. The end. I don't know what that was, but it was a story.
I'm not looking at that one again.
Ah, dear. What else has got? We got any more comments before you jump in? Agreed. When you walk into the room and they ask, "Are you going to tell the one about?" I get that all the, you know. I got a Francis Caffrey. Wherever you are in this world, thank you, because I heard, or I was told, Black Bubblegum, and it's a John Steinbeck story that's reimagined, the affair on Rue de M, and it is phenomenal, and it is probably one of the most requested stories, and I only tell it around Halloween, and it's a really good story. But anyway, Connie, please welcome Connie Blake.
Connie Regan-Blake.
Sorry, did I just say Blake then?
You did.
All right, let me do that properly.
That's part of the name.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only, the legendary, the warm-hearted, sometimes creepy, Connie Regan-Blake.
That's it. Thank you, Simon. On this eve of Halloween. So I do love those scary stories, but I'm going to do one that's not quite as intense, since we're not quite sure who all is going to be listening. And this is actually one of my favorites that comes from West Virginia, a woman named Ruth Musak. She was teaching at the University of West Virginia back in the 1950s. And she sent her students home during some of the breaks at Thanksgiving and at Christmas and the New Year. And she would always ask them to ask their parents about any stories. And this is one of those stories that came back to Ruth. And a student of Ruth's, who became a good friend of mine, Judy Byers, is the one that shared it with me. And I used this little ocarina, a little whistle, as a bit of a sound in it. It was the call of that bird that somehow sent a chill down her spine, and at the same time, it was welcoming. You see, Sally Milton had just moved to West Virginia, and it was like stepping back in time. She had graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, and she taught school for a few years there. But then she heard about an opening, a small town in West Virginia. They were looking for a teacher. She'd be the only teacher for 12 children. Well, that sounded real appealing to her, because Sally, in addition to teaching, her real love was painting. She could just get lost in her watercolors. So she went down to West Virginia to be interviewed, and she met Mrs. Sampson, the head of the school committee. And Mrs. Sampson told her that she would only be teaching these 12 children and that her afternoons would be free. Well, that sounded great to Sally. It meant she'd be able to paint. And then the head of the school committee said, plus we'll give you we can't pay what they pay in the city, but we'll give you your room and board. You'll have your own private room. And she was taken to that room, and the door opened, and it was a big expanse of windows looking over the South Jaw River. That cinched the deal. Within 2 weeks, Sally had packed up and moved to West Virginia. The first day of school, it was great. Practically the whole town had turned out to greet her. The children were on their best behavior. By 2 o'clock, she was at home behind her easel. Well, things were going really wonderfully well. She felt so welcomed by the community, and they would have her over for Sunday dinners and such. And she decided she wanted to do something for the townspeople. So she thought she would have the children put on a play for Thanksgiving. She'd invite everyone to come. She decided to stay after school to work on the project. After the children had left, she was sitting at her desk, because usually she did all of her school preparation during the day while she was teaching. That was part of it. This particular day, she had stayed after. She was sitting there at her desk, thinking about ideas and maybe costumes, and she heard the call of that bird. She felt that same sense of welcoming and foreboding. She went back to looking through books and jotting a few notes, and all of a sudden, she realized she wasn't alone. She looked up, and there, standing in the back door of the classroom, was a child. She'd never seen her before. She was dressed in old-timey clothes. She was holding on to an old book, it looked like. And then with one hand, she raised her hand, "Teacher, teacher." Tell me what my homework is. And where's my rag doll? Well, Sally was so scared she stood up quickly, and the child turned around and raced out of the room. Well, that evening, Sally went home and asked the person where she was staying. She told her what had happened. And the woman said, that child's ghost has been haunting that schoolhouse for generations. That's why we had arranged for you to be gone by 2 in the afternoon. She always came a little bit later. Seems that's when she visits. And she told her more about her. Well, that evening, Sally went upstairs and she hand-stitched a rag doll. And the next day, at 2 o'clock, just after, Sally was there in the room waiting. And she heard that bird. That same chill came into the room. And all of a sudden, the girl was standing there. Teacher, teacher, tell me what my homework is. And where's my rag doll? And this time, Sally walked slowly up and she said, child, I want you to read the first 3 pages of that book you're holding. It was a book from the 1800s. I want you to read the first 3 pages of that book. And here's your rag doll. The little girl looked up and took it. Thank you, ma'am. She curtsied and turned away and walked out the door. Sally went right to the doorway and looked and didn't see her anywhere. Well, that evening, Sally went back to Miss Sampson and asked her about it. And it was still light outside, and Miss Sampson told her to take a walk with her, and the 2 of them started walking towards the edge of town. And as they walked along, Sally heard that that child had drowned when she was in school. It seemed to be that she had been playing in the creek, and she always had a rag doll with her. That was a part of who she was. She must have been playing on the rocks and hit her head, and she had died. When they found her, they couldn't find the rag doll. Everyone looked, but no one was ever able to find it. By the time that story was told, they were standing in the old part of the cemetery, right in front of a gravestone that read, Rebecca Meredith, born 1902, died 1911. And sitting right up beside that gravestone was that rag doll Sally had made just the night before. Now, Sally continued living there. She loved it. And she never did see that child's ghost again. But every once in a while, she'd hear the call of that bird. And that's Ragdoll.
Wow. That is such a good story. Oh, Connie, thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, yeah, thanks for asking.
Oh my gosh. Tristan says, Connie, thank you so much for such a heartfelt story.
And in case anyone's interested, I do have a digital download of that story along with the rest of my ghosts. I have a whole recording that is all ghosts, both CD and digital downloads.
I just digitally downloaded it, actually.
Oh, actually, I did see that, yes.
Yes, I did.
Good.
But one of the things that Kristen likes about that story is honoring the child by giving her what she was longing for. And thank you for the empathy that you gave with that story. I totally agree with that. Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, it is a sweet ghost story. It really is. So true, so
All the ones
true.
that I tell are not necessarily for as sweet, but I do like those too.
But yeah, I told a story. There's a story. I can't think of what it's called now. It's the Rosewood Coffin. Um, and I thought it was a really deep story. And then when somebody came up to me afterwards and said that was a really cute story,
Uh,
I was like, oh, okay. I don't know. It was a bit bizarre when they said that. It's
People need different things. So that's one of the things I love about stories. That my intention is to have this platter,
uh,
and then there's a little bit of a main meal. There's some dessert, salad, soups, and then people can take whatever they need. Sometimes all they want is a bit of sweetness,
yes,
and maybe
yeah,
a bit of cuteness. And
yeah.
other times they want to, try everything that's on there.
It's true.
That's
It's
one of
true.
the beauties of storytelling.
So let's tell people how we can get that digital download of yours. So is it at Connie Regan-Blake?
It's at storywindow.com.
That's right, yeah. Story
And
window.com.
that's all right. I've got a bunch of CDs, not a bunch, but I've got a number of CDs. And I also, if anyone goes there,
And this is
love,
Connie's website. And
yeah,
this is also where you get the download. It's one and the same. You'll get your digital downloads, your CDs, any cassette tapes that she might have kicking around.
none of those anymore. But you can see my newest art form, which is,
That's
um,
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, do you know about that? I've really
Tell me
been,
about it.
I've been doing collage, and I take magazines and cut out images and calendars and sometimes my own photographs. And I've been doing it. I started doing it maybe 20 years ago or something, but would go maybe 2 or 3 years in between doing a collage here and there. And I've introduced them into workshops sometimes to have people work on a story through collage and get into that right part of the brain. Um, but about 5 or 6 years ago, I got with some other women here in town. There were four of us. We call ourselves the Collage Sisters, and started doing it on a regular basis. And we've continued that. We now do it on Zoom. And it's amazing how immersed we get and come up for air and talk and immerse again.
Yeah.
But my husband gave me the best birthday gift ever 2 years ago, a book. This, I can't even fit it all the way in the screen. A
Let me give
big
you the full screen. Let me give you the full
hard,
screen so you can
no,
show
no,
us
no,
all how big it is. There you go. Show us how
this
big it is.
big is that. Look, I wish I had it right here to show you. But it's a hardcover book of all the collages, or most of the collages I had done up until then.
Oh,
It
no
was an
way.
extraordinary gift. It just makes me weep and smile at the same time.
That's such a nice gift. Oh my
And
gosh.
and then people, though, friends, remember the times when people used to come over to your house?
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah.
So
I do that.
vaguely.
Those were the days. But some friends would look through and think, "Oh boy, I would love that hanging on my wall." So I ended up making greeting cards out of 20 of my collages. This is the first time I've ever kind of said anything about it in the world, out in the world. So, but people can take a look, and I'd love any feedback there. I've named each one, but it's just, I feel, a different way of telling stories, but a very different way.
Yeah. It is a very different way. And,
Yeah.
and collage is, there's something about collage I really like. Like you, I've probably done 4 in my life. Well, you've done a lot more than 4 because out of that huge book,
Yeah.
you've chosen
Now,
20.
used to be, yeah.
Chose to pick out 20, so I can't even pick out 20. I think there's 3 that I can put my hand on maybe. But yeah, there is something about creating that image of finding different things to create that story that you want to be told in that.
Actually, do we have a second, and I'll show you just one or two?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Do 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 do. So how's everyone doing out there? You doing all right? Thank you for all your comments. I really do appreciate that. It does mean a lot to me, and it means a lot to my guests as well when you comment on their stuff. And yeah, I did like your comment, Rachel, about tender and reverence often comes along with these haunting tales. I would definitely agree with that.
So you might want to do a full screen again.
I was about to. I got my fingers moving there.
So there's.
Wow, that's huge.
So this way it is.
There you go, right there.
What?
Tilt it back just a fraction. Oh, the other way, sorry.
Yeah, that light is still really on
yeah,
there.
tilt it forward.
Yeah. Oh well. You get an idea though. And then there's some smaller ones. So there's.
And these are all available on your website. Is that right?
Yeah, as cards, yeah. And I'll show you one more.
So they're not tiny cards either. They're like 5x7. Is that right?
The cards are 5x7. The collages are all different sizes.
Right. But I was thinking of the cards, so if people wanted to, because that 5x7 is a nice size. You can put like a couple in a frame.
Yeah.
And you know, talking about Christmas and Hanukkah and Diwali and all that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Oh, thanks. First time for them to hit the public eye.
Wow. That's 2 firsts here on Friday with Friends. Woohoo!
I did. Well, my camera just went out of focus.
It was all fuzzy, and then it went in focus when you came in with the pictures, and then it's all gone weird again. Well, folks, it is 2:16. Connie is so warm now after sharing that and embarrassed. She's fanning herself down with her artwork. Connie, thank you so much for being here. All of you people that have tuned in, Donna, Scott, Renee, Rachel, everyone. That's Kristen, who's Dale. Thank you so much indeed. I really appreciate it. It's always wonderful having everyone here with me as I chit chat with my guests. So we're going to close this out with could you give us one more toodaloo, wah, 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 on your thing?
Little wooden thing here. Here it is.
Be safe over Halloween, folks.
Yeah,
Thanks for being here. Take care.